It appears former Vice President Joe Biden is taking a more aggressive approach to the attacks leveled by President Trump. In a Washington Post op-ed published over the weekend, Biden writes, quote, "Enough is enough. Every day, every few hours, seemingly, more evidence is uncovered revealing President Trump is abusing the power of the presidency and is wholly unfit to be president." The tough rhetoric comes as Biden faces several threats to his candidacy. He raised less money in the third quarter than he did in the second quarter, and the $15 million he did raise was less than what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren brought in. On the polling front, recent surveys show Senator Warren is nearly neck and neck with Biden nationally and in some early states. And a recent Monmouth poll shows that 43% of Americans believe President Trump's accusations against Biden. For more on the 2020 race, I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, as well as CBSN political contributor, Democratic strategist, and CEO of Blueprint Strategy, Antjuan Seawright. They are both in Washington. Ed, I'm going to start with you. The Biden campaign issued a memo to reporters explaining how it plans to deal with the Ukraine controversy. So what is the main strategy?
Well, it's essentially to keep doing what he's been doing over the last 10 days or so. Just continue to sort of call out the president for saying and doing what he's been saying and doing, and essentially batting away any more detailed questions about what he and his son may have discussed about his son's work in the Ukraine and China, and refusing to answer questions about whether he at least understands why some people would consider his son's work overseas a conflict of interest. They're also spending about $6 million now on a TV and digital ad buy, primarily in early states, designed to, sort of sustain his numbers in those areas and remind voters why it is that he's running. And the other thing that they're trying to do is keep the focus on things that Biden would do as president, whether that's his new gun control plan or other elements of his health care plan, for example. We won't see Biden again out on the campaign trail again until Wednesday, when he makes 2 appearances in New Hampshire.
And speaking of the campaign trail, Antjuan, last week Joe Biden said Hunter Biden will eventually campaign with him. Do you think that's a smart move?
Absolutely, because again, as reports have indicated time and time again, there's been no wrongdoing on Hunter Biden's part or Vice President Biden's part. So why hide if there's nothing wrong? And so I think it's smart. Look, I think the worst thing the Biden campaign could do, and I've said this to his top lieutenants, is fall into the same trap as Democrats did in 2016 with the Hillary email conversations. The president has been very clear he wants to replay the same playbook that essentially ushered him to the White House, and we as Democrats could not afford to do that. And so I think they're taking the right approach. The only thing I will say to them when I speak to them again is clearly stay focused on the issues that matter to everyday working people. This does not fall in that bucket, and so continue to talk about quality of life issues like health care, like gun control, like wages, and the things that really the president of the United States, the next president, will have to deal with in a real way.
Absolutely, I get that. But just to stick with the impeachment inquiry for a moment, it's meant to uncover the facts and present a case for why the president should be impeached. Last week, Senator Elizabeth Warren was asked if there's enough evidence. Here's what she said.
I think the evidence is clear. When Donald Trump released the transcript in which he solicited a foreign government to interfere in the 2020 elections, he broke the law. And he did that in the context of already having interfered with an investigation into the 2016 elections and Russia being invited to interfere in our elections. He has made it clear that he thinks the law doesn't apply to him and that the point of the federal government is to put whatever resources are needed at his disposal to protect himself politically and financially. That is not the case. What he has done has committed impeachable offenses, and he should be impeached.
So, Antjuan, Senator Warren is convinced, but her fellow Senator Amy Klobuchar would not go as far. She said she would like to consider all the evidence beforehand. So is this another split in the party that's going to play out on the campaign trail?
I'm not sure. I think what all the presidential candidates have to realize is they have a role as the next potential president, and Congress has a role. I think taking the very measured approach, as Democrats are doing in the House, of the impeachment inquiry, which is gathering intel, gathering information, presenting the facts and laying out the case, because you and I both know, and Ed does too, the Senate is not going to move on impeachment no matter what evidence we bring. So if we can make the case with clear-cut evidence, we can be on the offense as Democrats in 2020, laying out corruption and the failures of a policy agenda by this president, and that's how you make it relatable to everyday people.
Okay, Ed, I want to turn now to Bernie Sanders, who went back home to Vermont this weekend to recover from the heart attack he had. It took him 3 days to disclose the fact that he had a heart attack. We're, of course, very glad that he's recovering. But here's how the other 2020 candidates reacted to that news.
I have every reason to believe Senator Sanders will be strong back on the campaign trail. We've had candidates before that have health concerns, and voters evaluate each one. But I'm welcoming my friend Senator Sanders back to the campaign trail.
There isn't a more important voice out there on some of the most important issues that this country faces. There isn't a more energized, energetic candidate and campaigner keeping up a relentless schedule. I have no fears about Bernie Sanders. It does not cause me any concern at all.
Look, a heart attack is no joke. Our bodies are fragile. We got to take care of them so that we can do our best to continue to try to serve the people of this country. And I hope Bernie just takes a moment to catch his breath and take a rest before he gets back to work.
I won't second guess what the decisions that Bernie Sanders or his campaign made, but I do hope that and wish him the best in terms of a recovery. And I know him to be a fighter and have no reason to think he's not going to fight this.
So nothing but well wishes from his opponents on the campaign trail. But for a candidate who frequently talks about transparency, the fact that this wasn't the most transparent or timely discourse by Sanders, will that be something the campaign will have to address at some point?
I think at some point they will, yes, Tanya. And as we speak, actually, we just got video of him apparently on a walk near his home in Burlington. There they are.
Oh, good.
Him and Mrs. Sanders just a little while ago. You hear him?
I feel very good, thank you.
When can we see you back on the trail?
Soon. Getting back to work a little bit right now. But mostly what I'm trying to do is, I used to walk a good distance every day, and I got out of that habit. I'm trying to get back into it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. All right? Okay.
See you guys. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yeah, he told us, Tanya, in an interview earlier this year that he is, long been a road runner. Somebody who would try to go out for a run every morning. So to his point there about being someone who was always out for a walk or tried to take frequent walks, he's definitely correct about that. But certainly questions remain about why his campaign kept everyone in the dark, including, as we learned over the course of last week, his own employees in these early primary states who were not told, essentially, what was up, what had happened to the senator, and what the plan was going forward. Over the course of the week, there was this sort of trickle of press releases about the number of people who donated in response to the news, a reminder that he'd had the largest fundraising quarter during the third quarter, and that some surrogates would be out on the trail for him this past weekend. But then suddenly at 6 o'clock Friday night, they announced, oh, by the way, he had a heart attack. And while that's, their decision to make, and all of his competitors, at least publicly, are saying that they hope he's well, it does raise some questions, I think, about how straight he's being with voters and whether they like it or not. It is a reminder that he is the oldest guy running for president right now, at a time when age has been a topic of conversation among voters across the country. Indeed. All right, so Antjuan, I want to turn to you now and talk about one of your favorite topics, South Carolina. God's country. The most recent polling continues to show that Biden has a large lead there with black voters. Warren has made some inroads, but the margin is still significant there. Is this a hurdle her campaign should be concerned about?
Absolutely. There's no way possible, in my mind, and keep in mind I've been doing this business for 15 years, you can become our Democratic nominee for president without having strong, wide, broad support in the African-American community, the most loyal and important voting bloc, I think, in the Democratic Party. Not to mention, if there's I don't see a scenario unless there's some sort of breakdown in the nerve center of this party, African American voters for Joe Biden, where those numbers would change. And I've said time and time again, I think Ed is probably tired of hearing me say this, the road to heaven and the White House runs through South Carolina. And the race does not start until we get to South Carolina, because after South Carolina, many of the states that follow have similar voting demographics.
All right. Well, we really appreciate hearing your perspective on South Carolina and everything else, Antjuan Seawright and Ed O'Keefe. Thanks to both of you.
Take care, Tanya.